Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Geography Podcast. I'm your host, Rabbi Eitan Levy. Tomorrow night, today is Tuesday here in the land of Israel, so Wednesday night is going to be the beginning of Purim, one of the most beloved holidays, I would say, although not technically one of the most important, but very beloved by many people, and in fact celebrated by many people who really have no idea what it's about. So you are not going to be one of those people because you're listening to this show. So you're going to know what the holiday is actually about, what the mitzvah, the commandments associated with it are, and we'll talk a little bit about, why those are relevant and what relevance they have for today and the Jewish people more generally. One of the key things to know is that Purim is not a biblical holiday. It's a rabbinic holiday. So the scroll of Esther, the Megillah means scroll of Esther, contains the story of what happened on Purim. And I'm going to go over it really quickly and very, somewhat superficially. There's an entire section of the Talmud dedicated to this. And it's very complicated, and it has a lot of depth, a lot of mystical stuff going on, and also a lot of details just in the way we understand the text. But we're going to do a quick flyby, and then we'll talk about what it all means. So the basic Purim story is that we have the Jews in exile in Persia. This is after the destruction of the first temple. At least that's the way it seems, obviously on the face of it. And we have the Jews in exile in Shushan, the capital of the Persian Empire. And Mordechai is introduced to us as the Jew, even though he is from the tribe of Benjamin. This is because now that all these Jews were exiled from the nation state of Judea, the area that was dominated by the tribe of Judah under the kingship of David and his descendants, we're all known as Jews, no matter what tribe we come from. This is the first reference to a person not from the tribe of Judah as a Jew. And this is the beginning of all children of Israel being called Jews. So Mordechai is introduced to us, and he has a young woman, Esther, who he is his perhaps niece, who he helps raise. And according to some of the Midrash, some of the rabbinic stories around the story, he perhaps married when she was an adult. And then we have a story about the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, or Ahasuerus, or however you want to pronounce it. It's a little bit complicated how you want to transliterate that. It's already transliterated from Persian to Hebrew, and now we're trying to do from Hebrew to English. Let's say Ahasuerus. And he's the king of Persia. He has a big party. He wants to solidify his reign. He invites everybody. He gives the Jews kosher food. He gives everybody can drink whatever they want. It's a big party. It goes on for days and days and days. They're all really drunk. And at this point in the story, he sends to his wife Vashti, who is the princess of the Babylonians, the people that he conquered. He sends for her and asks her to come and show off how beautiful she is, the implication being naked, in front of the crowd, and she being proud of her heritage and, if anything, looking down on Ahasuerus as a upstart, where she comes from a good royal line, from a different kingdom though. She refuses, and the king takes affront at this, and essentially at the behest of one of his people, one of his advisors, they have Vashti, this queen, killed. Well, the next day he wakes up with a terrible hangover and realizes what he's done and is upset about it because apparently he actually liked her. And his advisors say, well, here, we'll help you get over your broken heart quickly. We'll have a big beauty contest. We will essentially kidnap all the beautiful, eligible young women, eligible or not so eligible, the beautiful young women throughout the kingdom. We'll bring them all here. We'll give them a bunch of time to prepare themselves to look beautiful and whatnot. And then they'll come and spend a night with the king. And you'll pick the one you want to be your queen. And the rest of them will live in the harem forever and ever, because once someone has been in the bed of the king, we can't let her go out and be with any other man. That's according to the law. So Esther, the niece, perhaps wife of Mordecai, is taken in this dragnet looking for pretty girls, and she ends up going into the king. Long story short, she's very beautiful, she's very, very sweet, she's very smart, he likes her, he loves her, and he makes her his queen. In the meantime, we have Haman, who is a advisor to the king and a descendant of the Amalekites, King Agag. It says explicitly in the Megillah that he's Haman the Agagite, the son of Agag, who was an Amalekite king. And he does not very much like the Jews, because when he's rising up in the ranks of the court, and he goes out and he sees Mordecai the Jew sitting out there by the gate of the palace, and Mordecai does not bow to him. And Haman has quite an ego, and he can't stand the idea of this Jew not bowing to him. So he decides that he's going to have all the Jews in the empire killed. He goes to the king. He says, "King," he doesn't say which people he's talking about. He says, "There's this people that doesn't follow any of the laws of the kingdom. They have their own laws that they keep. They don't like other people. They don't eat and whatnot with other people. But most importantly, they don't keep the laws of the land. They have their own laws that they keep, no matter where they are. And I want to get rid of them." And the king says, "Okay, do what you want with them. Here's my ring." And he gives his signet ring to Haman, who writes a decree that the Jews are to be killed. And their stuff will be stolen, and that some amount of that stolen property will go to the treasury of the kingdom. And to pick the date, he takes a lottery, which is a bit strange, a lottery which is called a pur. And it comes out to be on the day of Purim, in the month of Adar, the 14th of Adar. So he comes and he does the lottery and he sends out the letters, and everybody's getting prepared, and the Jews are very scared. And Mordecai sends a message to Esther saying, "Go in and talk to the king and beg for the lives of your people." And she sends him back a message that says, "Look, I can't just go in anytime I want. If I go in without being called, the rule is that I'll be killed unless he grants me special permission. And he hasn't come to me any time in the last little while." And, and basically she's afraid she doesn't want to risk her life to go in there. So Mordecai sends her back another message, and he says, "Don't think that you'll be okay. There will be redemption for the Jewish people from somewhere. God has promised that the Jewish people will survive and they will be saved. It'll come from somewhere, if not for you. But you, if you stand by, who knows, maybe it was for this event, for this reason, that you became queen in the first place." Meaning, the real implication here is God's plan for the Jewish people and for the world is going to go the direction it's supposed to go, no matter what you do. But you, in this case Esther, but obviously you more broadly, you have a choice of what role you're going to play in the divine drama. Are you going to do the great good thing that God has set before you to accomplish, to realize your full potential? Or are you going to kind of slump off to the side and he's going to have to do it some other way? He wants to give you this opportunity, right? So Esther says, "Fine, ask everyone to fast." And they do, and that's why tomorrow, the day leading up to the evening when Purim starts, is the fast of Esther. And everybody fasts for the day, as Esther asked everyone to do. And then she went in and approached the king, and he granted her life. He didn't have her killed for approaching him without being invited. And she invites him to a banquet along with Haman. Haman comes. He's very excited. He figures, I'm in the king's good graces. The queen is inviting me to a special banquet with just the king and her. Wow, I must be really important. And at the banquet, the king says to Esther, what can I do for you? Anything up to half the kingdom. And she says, oh, just come to another party tomorrow night, another banquet. Okay. So he comes back to the party the next day. I'm skipping over some details, but you should really go read it. But just for the broad overview, comes back the next night, and Esther says, this man, Haman, has been trying to kill my people. And the king gets enraged and sends for Haman to be hung along with 10 of his 10 sons. And they can't rescind the previous order. So there's a problem. Once the king, the emperor, has sent out a decree, it can't be rescinded, not even by another word of the king. But he can send out another command which will effectively counter it. So he sent out this command that everybody should prepare to kill the Jews on this particular day. Now they send out to all the different lands messages to the Jews that they will now be allowed to defend themselves. And this sort of puts the fear of the king, if not of God, into the people in all these lands, and they are weakened and the Jews are strengthened. And on the day of Purim, they go out and they kill all the people who were preparing to kill them. So in the capital of Shushan, however, since the city is such a big city, they need an extra day. So the king grants them a second day to go and kill their enemies. And that is the second day of Purim. That's what we call Shushan Purim, because in Shushan, the city, it carried on for the second day. So that's why, according to Jewish law, any city which was a walled city from the times of Joshua, which basically for our purposes means Jerusalem, and a handful of other ancient cities in the world. Basically, Jerusalem celebrates Purim actually the day after, the 15th of Adar, which will be Friday this year, not the 14th. So the 14th and 15th are Purim. For our purposes, for all the rest of us that are not in Jerusalem, or again, a handful of other ancient cities in the world, and you should ask your local rabbi if you have any question, we're going to celebrate it tomorrow, Wednesday night through Thursday. Now, after all of this, Mordechai writes the Megillah. He sends out this letter to people, and the rabbis establish this as a rabbinic holiday. Now, since it's not a Torah holiday, it's a rabbinic holiday. It means we're not forbidden from doing malacha, from doing any of the things we're not allowed to do on Shabbat or Yom Tov. We're allowed to do all the things we're allowed to do on a normal weekday, but we have a bunch of extra commandments. We have 4 commandments. I'm going to start with the one everybody knows, which is actually probably the least important. So the mitzvah everybody knows is you're supposed to drink. You're supposed to have let's say a festive meal, actually, at which you are supposed to drink. Now, that's a little bit confusing, right? Because usually, if you know about Purim from pop culture, you're thinking, well, people go out to parties on the night of Purim. Well, that's not exactly right. I'll just put this out here. So first of all, the first commandment is drinking. The next one, let's say, is to hear the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, read. It needs to be read from a proper scroll written on parchment by a scribe. And there are special blessings that the person reading it says. You're supposed to hear it twice, once at night and once in the morning. There are mishluchei manot, which is gifts of food, which you're supposed to give to your friends, at least 2 different blessings. At least one of them should be either some sort of grain product, either the blessing of hamotzi or mezonot, so that it makes it a meal. And despite the custom to send people candy, which I think is basically something which leached over from Halloween celebrations, or I don't know, maybe just the idea that because kids like candy, but really it's supposed to be food that they're going to use to eat at their festive meal. And then the final mitzvah of the day is matanot le'evyonim, gifts to the poor. So on the morning of Purim, we go to the synagogue, we give, usually there are little boxes set out, and you can give money, And that money will be distributed by the community to poor people on that day. It actually has to actually get to the people that need it on the day of Purim, so that in theory they can use it for their costs for the day. But in any case, it gets into their hands that day, not month. It doesn't go into some account and get dispersed weeks or months later. It gets dispersed that day. Now, according to my rabbis, one should plan to spend at least as much on their gifts to the poor as on all the other facets of the holiday put together. That means the big meal and the alcohol, the costumes for your kids or yourselves, the food gifts that you're giving to your friends. Add together all the money that you're spending on that. Take at least that much money and give it to charity. I would suggest even double that amount, probably, for most of us, if you're not spending crazy amounts on those other things. So now I'm going to describe how it's actually celebrated. So on the evening of Purim, basically, the custom is kids and sometimes adults get up in costumes and everybody goes to synagogue and you hear the Megillah read. And every time Haman's name is read, everybody yells and screams, and the kids have little noise-making things in their hands that they do. Everybody yells, ah, like we're trying to blot out the name of Haman, the evil one. And then we go home and we go to sleep or whatever. We hang out, we go to sleep. It's a normal night. Big night dancing and parties and whatever is fine if people want to do something fun after the Megillah reading, but it's not a religious aspect of the holiday. The only thing religiously that you're supposed to do that evening is go to the Megillah reading and hear the Megillah read from beginning to end, every word. The next morning, you go back to the synagogue, you hear the Megillah read again, and again, people yell every time they hear the name of Haman, but usually the kids are kind of tired and fewer of the children come, and it's mostly just sort of adults, and it's a little bit quieter. It's less excited. People are less excited. Then the rest of the morning is spent, people walk around. While you're there at the synagogue, usually people will give to the charity there. They'll usually set in the center of the synagogue some boxes for people to give to different charities that will be dispersed over right after the prayers are over. And then you leave, you go around, you walk around the town together, you send your kids in to give the gifts to the gifts of food to your friends. It's very sweet. You end up with a big pile of treats and whatever sitting around your home, and food and whatnot. And then you go in the afternoon, after you pray the afternoon prayers, usually, people go to have a nice big meal, actually at the end of in the afternoon. And you sit around and you eat a big meal and you drink and you hang out until the day is over. And that's it. That's the celebration of Purim. I want to point out a couple things. One, the gifts to the poor is the most important mitzvah of the day. All right. I know it's not the one people think of, but it is. And if you have to skip anything else, then skip it. The gifts to the poor is the most important. Secondly, drinking at the meal. So the mitzvah is to have a meal, not to drink. The mitzvah is to have a meal at which you drink. So going to a party the night before, on the night of Purim, and drinking a lot has nothing to do with the commandment. There's no commandment to drink on the night, only in the afternoon during the day. Following the holiday starts at night. The next day in the afternoon is the commandment to have the meal and drink. Now, there are two different approaches that different people take to the drinking. Basically, in the Gemara, it says that you're supposed to drink until you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. Blessed be Mordechai and cursed be Haman, right? You should not be able to tell the difference. That's the degree to which you're supposed to be drunk. Now, there's a lot of question about what that means. Most people say that only applies for the men. And secondly, what does it mean exactly? So it's considered normal for a lot of people to drink very heavily at that meal. and you will find places where that's the norm. The Rambam, who I will follow on this issue, says that no, it doesn't mean to get completely drunk out of your mind. It means drink a little bit more than usual, get a little light, get a little happy, go take a nap, and then that's when you don't know the difference. It's that you drink enough that you get a little sleepy, you go take a nap, and you're good. So you don't need to get crazy. If you want to drink a lot, this is sort of the day where you have your permission to do so. Judaism is not a prohibitionist religion. We believe that everything has its time and place and can be raised to holiness in the right context with the right intention. But your intention going into that drinking is very important. People that go in to drink with the idea that, well, now I'm going to sort of let all my issues out and I'll be free to get away with things that usually I hold myself back from, that's a problem and you shouldn't do it. If that's the attitude you're going in with, you should just have a drink or two and call it a day. If you've done a lot of internal work, a lot of spiritual work, and really drinking what would otherwise be considered excessive alcohol is going to break down the boundaries between you and God and allow your soul to reach out and get closer to him, well, good for you. Just be careful that you're not doing it at other people's expense. So, and that's great. That's great. That's fine. That's up to you. It's definitely an individual choice. I would say, I recommend, talking to your loved ones or whoever will be around you at the time and talking to them about it a little bit beforehand, letting them know at the very least that this is what you're planning to do. And making sure you're safe and taken care of during that time. In any case, there's a limited degree of drunkenness that really you should do, because what's going to happen is the night at the end of this drinking, the sun's going to go down, and before you go to sleep for the night, you need to pray your evening prayers. So, however much you drink, it should not be so much that you won't be sober again 2 or 3 hours later after you stop drinking in time to pray the evening prayers, which you have to do with intentionality, meaning consciousness, meaning you can't be drunk, and that you'll need to do before you go to bed. So there is a limit, even to the more permissive view of how much you're supposed to drink, and of course it depends on your constitution and how much you think you can drink and still maintain your intentionality about what you're doing. That is all technical, and now I want to talk about a little bit what this holiday is really about. So Esther is the name of the main character, her Hebrew name was Hadassah. But the name we give her, the name she's given in the book, and as a sort of name to hide who she is, that she's Jewish, is Esther, which is related to the Hebrew root nistal, setel, hidden. And we call this the Megillah of Esther, the Megillah, the scroll of the hidden, because in the scroll of Esther, we don't mention the name of God even once. If you read through the story and you have no context of Judaism, of religion, of godliness, whatever, you could easily read through the story and say, oh, well, this is just a story. It's maybe even a comedy in classical terms that tells you about all these things that just happen to happen. And it comes out this way. It comes out as a comedy instead of a tragedy because the good guys win in the end. But that would be missing the point, right? The idea is that now, entering into the post-temple era, in this case, the post-first temple era, we are after the end of prophecy. We are when prophecy is ending. And now God's presence is more hidden. It's less directly revealed, and we have to look for it. It doesn't come out to us obviously. And one lesson that we learned from this is that this is sort of a paradigmatic example of God's presence being revealed in the world. And it's revealed in this way in every generation. Because, as we say during the Passover Seder, in every generation, someone will rise up against us to destroy us, that is us, the Jewish people, and in every generation God will deliver us from their hand. This is the first example of the Jewish people in exile, where a group of the dominant culture rises up and tries to destroy us, and in the end we're saved. Unfortunately, not all of our antagonists have ended up the same way, or at least not at first. Many of the people who have tried to destroy the Jewish people have been much more successful than Haman was. Hitler, Khmelnytsky, the Spanish monarchs in the late 1400s and 1500s. They destroyed and killed many, many, many Jews, large percentages of the Jewish people, before being destroyed. And that, I think, is one of the main points, is that although we can't see from our perspective the hand of God going on from moment to moment, when you zoom out, especially today, you look back over the last 2 centuries of exile, not to mention 4,000 years since Abraham and everything that the Jewish people went through, over those thousands of years, and you look at all the people who rose up and tried to destroy us, let's just start from the Greeks, the Greeks and the Romans and the Babylonians and the Persians and the Poles and Ukrainians and Christians of various sorts which were hostile, not to put all Christians of all times and places in one boat, but the Christian world throughout the Middle Ages, the different kingdoms of Europe, the different groups of Muslim fanatics who tried to kill us throughout the centuries, and our enemies today. And all of them from these previous ages were destroyed, and they don't really exist anymore in the same way that they did. Ancient Persia doesn't exist. They don't speak ancient Persian. They don't practice the same religion that they did then. They have an idea of being the same civilization, but really most of the essential aspects of who that civilization is have changed. The same is true of Egypt. The same is true of Rome. The same is true of Greece. Bits and pieces of those cultures survive, but their essence, their beliefs and practices, their worldview, in many cases even their language, and certainly their religions have not stayed the same from when they attempted to destroy the Jewish people until today. So we see God's hand in history, but only when we zoom far out, and we can see God's hand in our lives as individuals, but again, only when we zoom out. And one of the ideas about the drinking is that, well, what is more chaotic than a drunk person, right? Or we could say a person who's under the influence of something, right? If a person can be in a degree of heightened chaos, and even in that chaos where in a linear way, we don't even know the difference between good and bad anymore. Really, that sort of apparent chaos is where God's presence is the most revealed to us in some ways. And speaking from experience, I would say often the experience of Purim can be one where we only see that connection afterwards, say the day after. And that's all right. It's okay to only see it after the fact, but when we know that it will be there, we can look at any of the difficulties we're headed towards now, and we can see them in that context and know that even though we don't understand it, we have faith that it is part of God's plan. Even if we don't know why, even if we don't understand how, we know that as we zoom out through Jewish history, somehow we are serving a purpose in the mission to bring God into the world. Here in our time where we are empowered to serve our purpose. We have, each of us, our own mission that God's given us, that we are put here for a specific thing. And when the chance comes, you'd better jump on it, because that's why you're here. So I want to give us all a blessing going into Purim, that we should all be healthy, not go too overboard, that we should all have good experiences, positive experiences. We should all come to a closer place place between us and God where we can see God's hand in everything, where we can approach our true purpose in the world, and where truly our enemies will get what's coming to them. And it might seem to some to mix those things together, those sort of high-minded ideas of us fulfilling our purpose in the world and enemies being destroyed are contradictory, but in Judaism they're not. Oave Hashem sinu ra, those who love God hate evil. And this book is one example of evil getting its comeuppance. And may we all be blessed that our enemies today should see the same end in the near future. Have a happy Purim. God bless you.